we're going to continue to help people take knowledge that they hear from, trusted sources and figure out how to implement that in their day-to-day routine, but not forget that, like, if you don't sleep well, nothing else matters. If you're dehydrated, that's a huge detriment to your physiologic function. If you're not getting exercise on a, almost daily basis, that's a problem. If you're lonely, like, again, Brian Johnson, when I watched his docu, I was like, that seems like very lonely. Like, my heart ached for him. I was like, you need other people.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. It's been an incredible run. The guests just continue to amaze me more and more. Just the takeaways, the lessons, and really the reflections on the tangible items that we've been able to walk away from these episodes with. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Check out the show notes, pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious. I am very excited to share today's guest. Today I have Ryan Greene, Dr. Greene. He's an osteopathic physician specializing in human performance, sports medicine, nutrition, and the most cutting-edge recovery methods available. Dr. Greene's principal belief is that integration of a constantly collaborative, holistic, evidence-based practice amongst the health and wellness practitioners is crucial for individuals and societies in general sustain success. He's also the co-founder and medical director of Monarch Athletic Clubs in Los Angeles, the first private sustainable health and wellness facilities delivering traditional training services combined with physician-directed, evidence-based, and integrative medical intervention. The facility's key principles include training, recovery, nutrition, metabolic, genetic optimization, and mind-body enhancement. He also serves as the medical director of Reset by Therabody. Reset is the revolutionary brainchild of Dr. Jason Wersland's who is the founder of the Theragun, as a space in which an individual may appreciate the many benefits of evidence-based and medically directed therapeutic recovery to reset and recharge mind, body, and soul. Outside of the office, he was fortunate to have been selected and served for 3 years as an ambassador for Lululemon, during which time his role was to help develop and cultivate a greater awareness for their men's activewear offerings. Lastly, he's earned his Master's of Science in Exercise Physiology, Immunology, and Human Nutrition at University of Illinois. He completed postgraduate medical training at Dartmouth and the Mayo Clinic, during which time he collaborated with a wide array of leading medical experts, culminating in numerous published research efforts. He's currently a fellow of the world-renowned University of Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine under the direction of Dr. Andrew Whale. Ryan, thank you for joining me.
That was a lot, man. That was a lot. Sorry.
No, all good. Listen, I definitely sometimes cut out things depending on the bios that I get, but I did feel as I was reading through your bio, it was important to touch on all these items because they paint a picture of who you are holistically, beyond the fact that you're clearly highly trained and accomplished in your field. But the way that you describe your work and the way that you describe the purpose behind your work is going to speak to a lot of what we are going to dive into in today's conversation. So I think just to kick things off, before you became Dr. Greene, tell us a little bit about where you grew up, where life kicked off for you.
Yeah, so I was born in a suburb of Chicago, Wheaton, Illinois. Idyllic childhood. I have no complaints. Both my parents had good jobs. We lived in a place with great schools. It was back in the day where you didn't have cell phones, right? So your parents just knew that you'd come home for dinner and didn't really care where you were in between because they knew nothing bad was going to happen. I don't know if that exists anymore. But I think for me, although I'm obsessed with stories of founders and, other than your podcast, David Senra's Founders Podcast is something that really resonates for me now. And I've always listened to these guys' stories and they were born into really tough conditions and had to battle their way out. I wasn't. I was in, with that being said, my parents instilled very early on, like, whatever you want to achieve is up to you. It's the effort that you put forward. Like, we will help you get there when necessary, but nothing is going to be given. So, I grew up, education was extremely important. Movement and sports and participating things was extremely important. But there was a time when I was 13, I remember it, you know, very well. My dad was like, you got to stop playing one of these sports. You need to get a job. And I was like, I'm 13, like, this is insane. But he wanted to instill discipline and the value of a dollar and, what it took to, be successful in life, which is responsibility and things like that. So, yeah, I started caddying when I was a kid. And basically part of the reason I believe I ended up in this, field of medicine is I got to carry, 1,000 golf bags for 1,000 different individuals and got to, talk with them about what they do. And like, you have 4.5 hours with one person. Like, if you don't have the ability to converse, it's going to be a pretty miserable experience. And the only thing that ever interested me was medicine, like being able to, literally change someone's life, hopefully for the better. I excelled in school, which was helpful. And then as it came time to, put myself on a path to what was going to become next after high school, I just, migrated towards the health field and, went to University of Illinois. Most people won't know this, but somehow, I don't know how, I was blessed with a very good singing voice. So part of the reason I went to Illinois was they had a world-class men's a cappella ensemble that my mom took me to one of their concerts, and I was like, that seems pretty cool. So maybe I should try that. Yeah. So, instead of playing college sports, I got to travel the world singing with a group of 8 gentlemen, and we did hundreds of concerts a year, which was a unique experience, especially as a college student. But again, I think it helped round me in terms of like understanding there was more to life than just, partying or things like that. Like, I had other interests that I wanted to cultivate. And I'm grateful that University of Illinois provided me the opportunity to do that. Went to med school. I chose to go to an osteopathic medical school because I felt like being educated on everything in MD would learn, as well as the additional skills and license to do anything a chiropractor or a physical therapist could do, would be interesting. I felt like being more well-rounded would be helpful. I didn't realize the amount of bias between the MD and DO world when I got into it. It has, for the most part, subsided over the last 2 decades, but definitely significant when I started. And ultimately, I found myself loving surgery, being able to fix things with my hands, and so that's the path that I took. And again, fortunate that I had great mentors in med school. I believe in the power of the universe. I think there's only synchronicity. There's no coincidence. So I was able to like basically find myself learning from people that are exceptional physicians, and helped open doors for a DO to make it to Dartmouth and then eventually Mayo Clinic, like stuff that just didn't happen too often back then. But the interesting inflection point for me came once I got into the hospital space and realized like this is not health. This is not healthcare. And I'm sure you have talked to people in the past, and everyone listening, like, the healthcare system is broken is like the most common used idiom perhaps today. So I experienced that firsthand. And I also realized like it's hard to live a life where you are motivated to help people reach the absolute pinnacle of what they're capable of. That doesn't mean like sport performance. That's like, I want to be the best dad. I want to be the best grandparent. Like, I want to be able to show up and be present in life. How do you do that when, one, you're isolated from the general population? Like, you don't go to the hospital unless things are really bad. And also the entire environment in there is like, if you are in a acute situation, being in the US is great. If you need something to help you improve your quality of life so you prevent, what is now called chronic disease, going to the hospital is not doing that. And so I faced a crisis of conscience once I got there, because perhaps it was rose-colored glasses. You assume that everything's going to be exactly as you dream it would be. And then once you get in there, you're like, this is not it. At least for me, it wasn't it. But that was a tough place to be, because, in the medical world, like you go undergrad, med school, residency, fellowship. There's only so many different paths you can go: internal med, surgery, cardio, whatever. If you want to do something innovative or entrepreneurial, like that is not the education that you get in that system. Partially for good reason. I think it could be improved, but at least when I was going through it, like me coming up with this one-stop shop health and wellness concept, you're not educated on that. There's no residency program for that. So once I completed my training, I was in a very tough spot, like a very depressed state, because I was like, I've got 250,000 in loans. I don't want to be in a hospital system. I have no idea what else to do. Where do I go? I am fortunate that my time, at least as a fellow at Mayo Clinic, allowed me like a decent amount of time to ruminate and just try to think about what is my life going to look like? How am I going to help people? Which is why I got into this field in the first place. And what came to me was this idea for a holistic one-stop shop type of model. I was inspired by Mall of America, which is near Mayo Clinic, and Amazon, Whole Foods, Costco. I was just like, all right, like they're not the most sexy places, but like clearly people resonate with being able to show up to one spot and have everything that they need. Why don't we do that with health? And around February of my fellowship year, so about halfway through, a good friend of mine who was in LA, who was a trainer, was talking about creating kind of like a higher end training club. And I was like, dude, we don't need more fitness places. We've got plenty. What we need is a place that someone can go and get their blood work done and get physical therapy if they need it, and work with a nutritionist. That doesn't exist. I mean, it exists for pro athletes, but why doesn't it exist for the rest of the 8 billion people on this planet? And fortunate that my now business partners, believed in the vision and had the capital necessary to get this concept off the ground. So I scraped together every last dollar plus, some support from my parents to move out to LA. And I've had to hustle, man. Like part of the reason why, that list of things is so long is because like, I've been a startup founder now officially for 6 years, and, multiple years before that, like no salary, not getting paid, like still got to pay your bills, still got to pay back loans. Like I've had to hustle, man. I've been in LA for 8 years, and, it's a beautiful place to live, but, I have in no way, shape or form been able to coast just because, I'm a physician and my life theoretically should be idyllic. Like it's been tough. And the beautiful aspect of this journey is that, I firmly believe if you can find something that you can do for the rest of your life and you do it, even if you didn't get paid, like that is a blessing. There are only a handful of people, I think that are fortunate enough to experience that. And I definitely believe that I'm one of those people because, I've been doing this for purely the love of it. And I know that at some point, the rewards will start to come in, but humanity needs what we're doing, which is a blueprint, an ecosystem, a place that people can go to basically return to themselves, to learn, like, why am I here? Maybe it's not sports, maybe it's to host a podcast. But if you feel like shit, no offense, like you can't be the best podcast host, the best author, like it doesn't work. So whatever your passions are, whatever your joy, whatever brings you joy, like that is our goal, is to help you exist so that those things can come to fruition. It just so happens that the vehicle is, helping you sleep better, eat better, move better, connect with other people, pay attention to what your body's telling you. So like those are the nuts and bolts of what we do. And, I don't think those will ever change. Like we clearly haven't figured that stuff out yet from a society standpoint. So I'm grateful that we'll have hopefully decades and decades worth of, progress to be achieved.
Yeah. Thank you for all that context. I mean, there's so many things I want to dive into just kind of from hearing that, and it's all, first and foremost, thank you for being one of the trailblazers right now. Like we have established on this show a couple of times, the issues that we face with the healthcare system, and it's people like you who've been on the show, who aren't afraid to spearhead, the change and trailblaze the change the industry needs. And so we're going to dive into all that. And I really appreciate that you called out the changing dynamic in the DO MD landscape. Look, when I was in college, I actually got accepted to a DO program, and the difference between me and you is that I wasn't so interested in the world of medicine. I was not a good student when it came to the sciences. I was better when it came to the numbers in the finance world. But nonetheless, I wasn't really sure where my career was going to go, and so I accepted the opportunity to at least start off in that program. And I do recall the back and forth between the DO and MD world, and the feelings that, like, if you're going down the DO route, you might be a less than the MD at the time. And this was back in 2005. So long time ago, 20 years ago now, which is wild to say out loud. But it's really reassuring, and the way that you worded it is perfectly. Because look, if I'm going to see someone right now, I do want someone who has that ability to understand how my body would be handled from the perspective of a physical therapist or a chiropractor, especially as an athlete. Like, like, and so that additional knowledge is critical. So really cool to hear, at least from my perspective, just because I've been out of that world, to hear that gap has been bridged. So now, if we kind of take it back toward the mission and where you are today, I have been speaking to a lot of people in your field recently about this. And one of the things that's really cool to me, and you talk about being a startup founder for the last 6 years, is I was out to dinner with two doctors last Friday, actually, both of which have left traditional healthcare. One of which is working in Manhattan for a concierge medical practice. Another one is opening up their own concierge medical practice out on Eastern Long Island. And they both are looking at it from different perspectives. One of them just became a father and talked about the fact that, as he is now kind of going down the route of fatherhood, he couldn't imagine, continuing to work within the system. And was admittedly very out of shape, as he was going through his training. His habits weren't great. And he realized he needed to make a change, not just for himself, but for his family. And then the other doctor was also talking about it more from the business perspective, and talking about, the opportunity there. And especially if you're in Manhattan, the amount that you can potentially charge clients. And to Manhattanites, it's not going to seem like a lot of money. And he was talking about the business opportunity there. But what really impressed me was the fact that in order to go down this route, you have to be a lot more than just a doctor. And you kind of alluded to this too. Like the way that I heard them talking about building their businesses, the tax benefits, talking about long-term investment strategies, talking about scaling their businesses, talking about, things to consider geographically as you build out these businesses, how close two offices should be together, things like that. And it really dawned on me that it's really unfortunate that there are so many people who are going down the route of med school who, to your point, are not going to be educated on this stuff. They're not going to be set up for success. And I think this is one of those things where there's no turning back, because this is the way, right? This is medicine 3.0. Is that what it's referred to now? Right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. That's Peter. I think Peter Attia's
yeah,
uh,
that's the way Peter
got
Attia
it.
puts it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, speak to me a little bit about that with regards to how much you know about um, this transition as it pertains to people up and coming now. They've got to be seeing what you're doing.
I have no shortage of. I actually got two text messages yesterday from medical students, and I've had a couple students come out for rotations. but I get a pretty good flow of emails of people in the medical field, whether they're residents or med students or pre-med, who are like, hey, I heard about what you're doing. I've wanted to do this. How do I get to where you are? I get a lot of that. So clearly in the medical space, that's starting to resonate. The unfortunate part is, the metric that I think most people have heard is like it takes about 17 to 20 years for the medical establishment to like really adapt or adopt a new principle or practice. And that's in terms of like treating people. The traditional med school programs have essentially been the same since the early 1900s. Like it hasn't changed much. Um, so the unfortunate part, and I'm just going to be brutally honest, is like I don't know how soon we will be able to adjust like the curriculum or the roadmap for people to get to do what I'm doing, because it's just like it takes forever to change anything. And I think we're also in the early stages of like, what does preventive medicine mean? What does longevity mean? Like, longevity requires a long time. I think we're in this unique space where everyone's talking about NAD, peptides, all this stuff that the traditional establishment isn't necessarily educated on. But we're also in like the first generation of people using these things. Like, we're probably gonna have to wait 30 to 50 years down the road and find out like, okay, these individuals that did these things consistently for decades, did they live better? Did they live longer? We just don't know. So, my advice to, up and coming medical practitioners is like, you know, unfortunately, you got to go through the system as it's currently designed. And hopefully on the other end, you will maintain your entrepreneurial spirit and perhaps branch out and try something different. But it's tough, man. You're buried in debt. When I graduated med school, like some of my colleagues, I had like 250 in loans. Most of them had 350 to 400. Like the idea of becoming an entrepreneur and like not making money for a while, especially if you want to have a family, is like traumatizing. So most people just rank and file, take a job, signing bonus, good salary. Are they happy? Maybe. I think a lot of them realize that that's not exactly what they want to do the rest of their life. But you're definitely stuck between a rock and a hard place. So, if I was to do my path over again, I definitely would have gone to a program that had a dual MBA. So at least I got, additional business understanding. To your point, like, you open your own concierge practice, like, you have to be a business person. And like, that's education I got zero of. I'm fortunate that my business partners had been, successful entrepreneurs. So like, they helped me and still help me along the way. Yeah, I think the medicine 3.0 movement is going to be spearheaded by people that have been, independently successful and have the resources to try new things. Brian Johnson, right? Like, that's not a lifestyle that I'm super interested in, but we have to be grateful for people that are going to like push the limits and see what's possible. And then we can, figure out how we can adapt and integrate into, our lives in some way, shape, or form. So I think that's where we're at. Me personally, I'm hopeful that as Monarch grows, not only for medical, but for physical therapy and perhaps nutrition, we can serve as an education opportunity for students who just want to like see what, medicine could be, or like alternative ways of approaching. And if at least that plants a seed in their head that at some point they can, nurture and come back to down the road, like, so be it. But unfortunately, you know, I don't think traditional medicine is going to change a ton, at least over the next few decades. So I do think it's going to have to be people that are outside of the system that manifest the most amount of change.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, they're obviously none of us know the answer and then how it's going to happen and how it's going to go down. Uh, I'd say that the vast majority admits that we do have a problem, both with the hospital system, obviously with the insurance system. And so, um, I can I can speak obviously for myself and for a lot of the listeners who are in the health and wellness space. Um, we know this is the way. We don't know the exact day we'll get there. You
Right.
know, we don't we don't have the ETA.
No, no, and I think it's going to continue to evolve. We are aggressively pursuing, um, you know, improvement in terms of the virtual experience. Like, how can you take my mind and my expertise, and obviously AI is a super hot topic. How do you get to contact and work with me, even if it's not like this, but you can at least get my expertise. Same thing with all other aspects of health, nutrition, lifestyle optimization. So I think there's a lot of things that are going to be happening in concert. But I do believe people need people. I don't think isolating and creating technological and virtual uh, health optimization everything is necessarily the way forward. I do think we need connection, and what we've seen, at least with Monarch over the last 5 years, is um, there's no shortage of technology, but there's definitely a lack of understanding into how, what, why, and where things should be done. Which again is why, like, you show up to a place like Monarch, it's a one-stop shop, and as long as you show up, you're going to make progress. I do think that that is going to continue to be an important aspect of anything in health, which is um, you know, let the experts be the experts. And as long as you are immersed in their field of impact, then you're going to do great.
This is more out of curiosity, but in the concierge landscape, when I think about patients, especially newer patients, and the fact that it's cash, it's cash, it's not insurance. Um, how have doctors such as yourself gone about building boundaries with patients? Are patients expecting to be able to reach out to you more frequently under this kind of setup?
They definitely ask more questions. From our experience, because the traditional health system and overall customer service experience in that world is just so generally unpleasant.
Yeah.
Just the fact that they can get an email back from a physician within
It's better.
24 hours, I think, is like
Yeah.
life changing. Um, so,
So
we're definitely not running into people being like, it's 10 o'clock at night. I demand you get back to me by
okay.
midnight. I just think the fact that, again, like, I'm sitting in our West Hollywood club right now. There's people training on the floor. Like, if they want to come back and ask a question, like, they can come back and ask a question, or they can book an appointment. So I think it's so novel to them and just like such a relief that they can get answers to questions in short order. Like, for us, it's there's no hindrance in terms of like people demanding answers. Um, in the concierge model, basically that's what you're paying for, is convenience and ease of access. I think ours is a little bit different in the sense that, like, when you're working with a concierge physician, it is typically because you are unwell and you need some sort of service or remedy. For us, like, we have medical staff at a club every single day. Most people are coming here because they're working out or doing PT or just whatever. They're not coming here because they're necessarily sick. They might be, but for the most part, people are here because they want to continue to function at a high level. So I think our demo is a little bit different. But in terms of concierge medicine, like, clearly you can put a price tag on access and convenience. And I think the concierge model is going to continue to flourish.
So one thing that's been abundantly clear to me now, like in my head, I'm like thinking about every doctor that I've spoken to who's kind of taken this route now. And I can think of 5 to 10 people that I know, in one degree of separation. And the one thing that is common amongst all of them is that these are all people who care about their health and wellness, or came to a realization that they weren't in a good spot at one point and then, started taking care of their health and wellness. And so I guess the point of me pointing this out is there a divide in the medical community? And I asked this question before on another episode, with other physicians who perhaps, you know, liked it the way that it was and don't necessarily, I don't know any out of shape doctors, put it that I don't know any out of shape doctors
I
leading.
know plenty.
You
I
do
know plenty.
going down the
Yeah.
concierge route?
Oh,
Yeah, no, that's the thing.
no,
I know
yeah.
plenty of out of shape doctors. I don't know any out of shape doctors who are going down this route. And that for me kind of speaks volumes, right? Because it, eh, I would like my doctor to take care of themselves. Like, right? Like, especially as some right? Like you and I've been a lot of doctors throughout my lifetime. I don't know how much you know my background, but I had pediatric ALL. So I have several doctors throughout my lifetime, several hospitals, several encounters, surgery, so on and so forth. And it was really easy to point out when a doctor was out of shape or when a doctor was a smoker. Like those two things really, really stood out right away. And now, giving everything that's happened in my life, you know, I'm literally looking at their picture before I go in to just kind of do my own assessment going in. And so I wonder, as in every other field, there's a divide, right? And there are people who maybe like things the way they are because it just benefits them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you kind of when my turning point, my aha moment, which was like, oh shoot, maybe the hospital system is not correct for me. The beauty of the residency system as it is like you get to work with incredibly talented physicians. They're your attendings, they're your teachers. But for me, it was also a window into what would my life look like 20 to 30 years from now. And generally, it was a lot of stress, overweight, substances, poor diet, strained marital or family relationships. And I was just like, damn, like, I don't know, like that doesn't necessarily sound pretty good. Like, I enjoy keeping myself healthy and eating well. And then all of a sudden, my attending started asking me, like, how do you train? Like, what do you lift? How do you work out? Why are you eating that bar that's in your, white coat? And I was like, oh, like, this is interesting to me. Like, I enjoy talking about this stuff. I enjoy helping people. Like, and perhaps that's going to supersede my passion for, the surgical space. Um, so that for me was, a motivation to be like, oh, shoot, maybe being in this hospital system is not necessarily the place for me. And to your point is like you've got the old guard, which is like what hard work is. It's working 30 straight hours where like literally everyone's dying and you have to stay awake and make critical decisions. Like I had to do it, my attendings had to do it. Now you have to do it. And I have this new wave of people, which is like being up for more than 24 hours in a row is insane. And like the amount of mistakes you make is astronomically higher than when you get good sleep. Like, why do we continue to subject ourselves to this old system? And then you've got this unique group of people, perhaps, you could include myself in there, which is like, all right, like I've tasted what it's like doing it the traditional way. And I also know like how to live healthy. So how can I kind of merge the two? Like I'm still doing, 14 to 16-hour days, but also like I wake up and prioritize movement. I happen to be in a space where like, if I wanted to take this call on a treadmill walking uphill, like I could do that. You know what I'm saying? So like I've surrounded myself with ways that I know that I can maintain my physical and mental health. And yeah, perhaps it's these early adopters that also realize just like, beating the shit out of yourself means you're not going to live much longer than 65 or 70. So what's the point of working that hard when you're not going to be able to be around to enjoy it? Maybe that's this group of people that's branched off into more of like the entrepreneurial concierge space is, the folks that think differently.
When you refer to Monarch, do you guys have a mission
Yeah.
statement?
Yeah. So we have, our overall mission statement is to help humans be human. So, you know, what does that mean? I think it's different for everyone. That's kind of what I alluded to. Like for you, maybe it's hosting this podcast and then, running a ton of races until you're 100 years old. Ultimately, I think humanity is the pursuit of, you know, whatever brings you joy, whatever, is a passion of yours, ultimately allowing you to choose what you want to do, when you want to do it, for as long as you want to do it. So that's what, being human means, is being able to participate in life. And then, our hero line is what we call everything for a reason. Basically, like if you are a Monarch member, you have access to everything that you need to live a long and healthy life, to be that, the best version of yourself. But we do everything for a reason. We don't just pack stuff into our clubs just so you can be like, hey, we have all these different tools and technologies. Like everything that we are doing is designed for a purpose, and it is in place so that people can be not only educated, but also advanced within these different foundational tenets of what we do: movement medicine, nutrition, mental health, and physical therapy and rehabilitation. So, in our opinion, if you have everything that the human body needs and you use it purposefully, you should be able to achieve the ultimate version of yourself, which is, like in our perspective, the ultimate expression of humanity.
Hey, Mile 40 fam. I get asked a lot about my training programs and how I set myself up for success to cross finish lines all over the world. Well, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Recovery is half the battle. And in order to get that recovery, I rely on clean sources of protein. That's why my go-to protein shake is Owen. Only what you need. I have one after every single workout. 100% vegan and plant-based, Owen's plant-based shakes use a multi-source protein blend of pea, pumpkin seed, and flax seeds to include all essential amino acids to promote optimal daily health. Uncompromised taste. Owen brings together the essential elements of advanced nutrition, amazingly clean ingredients, functional superiority, and uncompromised taste. Now go ahead, go to www.liveowen.com. That's spelled LIVEOWYN.com. Use code MILE40 for 20% off your next purchase. Only what you need. In your experience, since you've been building this, was it a bigger hurdle for you to take the leap, financially coming out of school with loans to have to realize that you're probably going to go into further debt in order to build a business like this? Was that a bigger hurdle, or was it, given the fact that you're one of the first people to do something like this, to sell this, to sell this model essentially to the public?
Yeah, I will be honest with you. Every ounce of my being believed and still believes that what we are doing is necessary for the world. So I did not think about the financial ramifications. Something just inside of me was like, it's going to work out. And I still believe that. I am fortunate that at various times where things got tough, I did have support when necessary, um, to catch up on some loan payments or something like that. Like, yeah, I think one of the greatest powers that anyone has, but we don't often use, is asking for help. And, fortunately, I have a family structure where, like, if you find yourself in a tough spot, they can step in and support you. So, in no way, shape, I'm not a trust fund child. Like, I'm not just out here living. Like, I have to, hustle, as I mentioned. But I did not think about the financial ramifications. The hardest part was getting the general population to see what I see and why it is an important investment for, future health, happiness, and success. Because I think we have a very hard time uh, understanding or comprehending why my decisions at 30, 40, 50 are going to be exponentially more helpful or harmful when I'm 60, 70, and 80. Because we don't think like that. And, to date, like, our closest quote unquote competitor is like an Equinox, which is, $300 to $400 a month. And most people assume, well, if I'm an Equinox member, like, I clearly care about my health. And I would say, like, well, maybe, but that's just the fee to get you in the door. Like, there's, what I'm saying? Like,
You're not
you're
getting that
self-directed.
service. Yeah.
Yeah, you're self-directed. And so, how much will it mean to you, both monetarily and also from a quality of life, if you invest in something that's much more comprehensive? And it's just something that people hadn't seen or heard of. And so when you see your credit card statement of $1,500, people are like, shit, like, that's an expensive membership. And it's, we acknowledge we're not extremely low cost, but at the same time, like, the long term impact and reward for investing in yourself now, it's that delayed gratification principle. And if you have the patience and the tolerance, like, you'll do great and you'll thank yourself 20 to 30 years from now. And some people aren't quite there yet. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Well, it's the same idea as, like, look, a lot of people pay for that Equinox membership and then they walk inside and they have no idea what to do. And then there's a trainer that comes up to them and then, asks them, why they're hesitant to make the commitment to perhaps, work with someone like them. And the way that it's positioned is, it's an investment in yourself essentially. And so the gap is not 1500 to 300, 400. The gap is, actually a little bit closer because a little bit, as people start to kind of buy into the importance of investing in themselves, all of a sudden they are paying for those additional resources. And uh, I think over time, the last 15, 20 years in particular, it's becoming more and more common for people to understand, again, the importance of putting priority into investing in themselves holistically. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's good for you. Um,
yeah, for sure.
so
We're kind
tell,
of at this juncture. We're
yeah,
kind of at this juncture where, like, 5 years ago, we didn't have as many like recovery concepts. Now you have bathhouse, othership, remedy place, perspire. Like, those are typically 250 plus per month. You mentioned concierge medicine. A lot of people are being forced to or choosing to shift to a concierge model. So that's $500 a month. Like, what we have proposed is essentially, let's make this, much more condensed, much more convenient and full service, so that you have, instead of paying the same amount in multiple buckets and having to go to multiple different places, like, you have everything in one spot. It's a well coordinated machine. It's a coordinated team. It's just, so you're right. Like, the barrier is getting smaller. And I think there's an added intangible value of just knowing that once you walk in the doors, like, everything that you need is available, and all you have to do is show up.
I just kind of had an idea as you were speaking, and I don't know if I'm creating the new business idea, but is there something like this? Have you heard of anything like this for adolescents or children when it comes to concierge medicine?
I haven't, but it's we have a similar uh, connection there in terms of, like, what would this. To be honest, I think this is more important for, like, kids,
Yeah.
to, like, help them change their behaviors before they become, too
Adult.
significantly ingrained.
Yeah.
I was thinking, yeah, like, what would it look like to put this in college, and then, and instead of your, college health fee that you pay as part of tuition, that goes towards, this kind of program that's contained within, a large university ecosystem. Yeah, we haven't done anything there quite yet, but certainly opportunities for the future. Is like, what does this monarch system look like if it's integrated in schools and things? You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So
Yes,
I've
and
definitely thought
it
about
just kind of, like, came up in my head because it's like,
that.
you're right. You do wanna ingrain this behavior in them before they get, too stuck in their ways. And also, um, I think it can become something that they latch onto actually a lot quicker than adults who haven't experienced it, right? Like, I think about adults who have been going to see, their PCPs for the last couple decades, you know, just there's just a hesitancy around like, "Hey, like, you know what? Maybe you should go here instead, and maybe you should think about doing it differently." And there's also the overwhelming question of, what are you gonna do with your insurance? Do you need your
So
insurance? Like,
yeah,
people don't wanna pay, double pay for something, especially if they think they're in good health.
yeah, and I think, one, so the reason that we wanted to be considered a medical facility, like, that's how we were designed, was so that, one, we could leverage the systems that currently exist, insurance as much as we can, whatnot. And the only way you're going to do that is if you're, a medical facility. Um, the other part to your point on the youth movement is, it is very hard for people to change behavior, and there's a lot of factors, obviously physical, mental, emotional, things like that. I read a stat, and it has held pretty true, that most Americans 35 and older are on 3 to 4 prescription medications. And by the time that a lot of them find us, they may be mid 40s, mid 50s. Our demos, like, late 20s to early 60s, 70s. it's hard to tell someone like you've been told for the last 20 years you need to be on a statin, you need to be on a stimulant and all this other stuff, and trying to get them to peel off. So you're 100% correct. Like, getting to people before that these behaviors become solidified is extremely important. Yeah, just hopefully I'll be able to do this for another 80 years, and before you know it, you'll have Monarch in every
I'm
school
here
around the
for
country.
that. Tell is
Yeah,
is
me too.
Monarch just based in Los Angeles right now, or are there any locations?
Yeah, so we have West Hollywood, Brentwood. We're opening a third in May, so in about a month and a half in Playa Vista. We really wanted to establish, brand equity and work on our uh, business systems and functionality within a smaller geographic location. But then in the fall or winter of this year, we'll be opening a location in South Beach in Miami, and we've got one in Pasadena, and we've got one back in Miami, and then a couple others in line after that. So we feel pretty confident that we'll do well now that we're expanding our borders, and we have 6 years of practice under our belt. So still
How many
challenges.
physicians are under the system right now?
So we have just me as a medical professional, and then we have two nurse practitioners. So we basically have one medical professional per location, and we don't need more than that. Most members are coming in every 3 to 4 months to check in, body comp, blood work, goal setting. So, our highest frequency touch point of any service is personal training by far. So that's definitely where we, focus most of our energy and capital in terms of labor. But the medical side, again, like most people see a physician or get checked in on like once every 1.5 to 2 years. So like, you know, having a club with 300 to 400 members checking in 3 to 4 times a year is absolutely manageable with one high quality medical professional.
So we brought up Peter Attia earlier on, just kind of quickly on the
Yeah.
episode, and some people may have read his book. Some people may be following him. He's obviously been on a ton of podcasts, and he's someone who's obviously kind of really helped lead the trail on this, at least from a public perspective. But just to educate the audience, whether it's Peter Attia or whether it's someone else who's very well known, as it pertains to this movement in medicine, are there any myths out there that you can debunk? Or, are there any elements to quote unquote medicine 3.0 that you're personally still not sure about, still figuring out, or still thinking through? Just to kind of give the audience a wider lens beyond just what you're doing, but what the broader movement is speaking about. So people know, you know, what's still in motion in terms of things to
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah. So, I mean, for those who haven't read Outlive, which is Peter Attia's book, it's a great book, definitely worth the read. Where I think, my passion and what we're doing with Monarch uh, helps support Medicine 3.0 is there's a lot of very smart people that have a lot of very accurate information, and we have plenty of platforms to share. The question is can someone absorb that and then put it into practice? And that's where I think the gap, which we're, hopefully fixing, exists, which is how do I take what I hear on Atia's podcast and do it at my YMCA, do it at my 24-hour fitness? So I don't think, the majority of the information, sleep routine, hydration, maintaining muscle mass, maintaining power, you know, dietary changes, whole food, plant-based, high quality protein, like all those things are valuable. Same stuff that we tell all of our members about on a regular basis. I think for me personally, I think we've leaned too heavily into supplementation. I think where I sit and we sit is supplements are meant to supplement your lifestyle. So, you know, we really try to get people to improve like their day-to-day decision making and behaviors before we start to dump supplements into the system. Not only because like we're not actually solving anything for the most part, because again, like most people will stop taking the supplements if they forget or they travel or whatever. So we really try to work on those lifestyle tenets that are important. The other part is quality control in the supplement space. Like when we talk about all these different supplementation components in functional, medicine, what medicine 3.0, whatever, we're relying on manufacturers that have very little oversight, and everyone says that, they have the highest quality third party tested, but there's been numerous studies done in the last few months and years looking at just general quality control amongst like the top SKUs being sold, melatonin, other things like that. Wild variety in terms of dose per capsule or dose per pill, even within the same bottle. So I think until we better regulate or standardize like that space, the supplement space, that's the one area where I kind of like find myself deviating a little bit, because we see 600 patients a week in some way, shape, or form, and like I can tell you, 99% of them have no sleep routine. They still drink too much alcohol. They're not drinking enough water. They don't pay attention to how much protein they consume. It's like it's the simple stuff like that that you're not going to fix with supplementation. And we do have some people who take a ton of supplements because they were told at some point or other that it was helpful, and then they start to have elevated liver enzymes because their liver's just like processing so many things, even though they're consumed with good intent. So that's one. NAD is an interesting one too. It's just like there's a lot of I'm huge into peptides. Like I think NAD has potential. I think the peptide space is incredibly interesting, and I've seen incredible results when used appropriately. But a lot of these longevity molecules, as I kind of alluded to earlier, like require you to do things consistently in perpetuity, right? With health, wellness, and longevity, you do not get credit for time served. You don't get, built-in months because you exercise for 90 days. Like that's not how the human body works. So we get a lot of people that get really distracted by like, do I need to take rapamycin? Do I need to take NAD? I'm like, maybe, but we're really not going to know what's happening here until you take this consistently for years to decades, and then you can compare yourself with people that lived similarly and didn't do that. And that's the tough part, because a lot of the the randomized controlled trials that everyone wants to see, like they're not going to be done in human beings. It's too long, it's too expensive. No one wants to be in the group that doesn't get the intervention. So we have to rely on other methods of trying to understand what are these things doing, and that's a mouse model or something like that. Close, but we don't necessarily know how things are going to translate from one to the other. So I think for me, like, yeah, we're going to continue to help people take knowledge that they hear from trusted sources and figure out how to implement that in their day-to-day routine, but not forget that, like, if you don't sleep well, nothing else matters. If you're dehydrated, that's a huge detriment to your physiologic function. If you're not getting exercise on a almost daily basis, that's a problem. If you're lonely, like again, Brian Johnson, brilliant. Like when I watched his docu, I was like, that seems like very lonely. Like my heart ached for him. I was like, you need other people. So perhaps our approach is extremely simple, but I do think simple things done consistently have incredible outcomes. So that's kind of where we
Thank you.
differentiate from
No,
medicine 3.0.
thank you for that insight, because again, I think a lot of the listeners here may have read Outlive, and given the other guests that we've had on the show, with this being a topic, have started to do some of their homework. And the truth is that most of us are not in the field directly. And to your point, most of the advice does sound sound. Like it sounds like it's things you should be doing. But it also seems too obvious that perhaps there's something that we need to look deeper into, and something that the average person wouldn't think about. So just having that context is great. Dr. Greene, I just want to thank you. I mean, like all this context has been great. And what's been really powerful for me, and I'm sure for a lot of listeners out there, is the fact that this is so mission driven, on your end. And I think a lot of people may not understand that despite the fact that you're highly educated, you could have gone any one of different routes in order to practice medicine, have a really solid income, create wealth for yourself, that you had to take a step back, essentially, reinvest in what you believe in, and take a leap of sorts, because you were so convicted in that belief that this is the way of the future, and this is really what's best for society as a whole. And so, I think my final question to you is, if you were to, speak to the listener who's thinking about doing something similar, whether it be in the medical field or whether it be in another arena, what's some advice you would dish out? What is some guidance that you'd give out? And from the heart, talk to us about what the last 6 years have meant to you, with regards to the vision that you had when you began.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for saying all that. So my advice, my mother passed away a couple of years ago, and she was one of my biggest supporters. She didn't exactly understand everything that I was doing, but she just knew that I was passionate about it. And um, the day before she passed, I was actually in her room, and she wrote something down that I posted on Instagram on a sticky note. Said, "The positive thinker sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible." And I couldn't believe that my mom, it resonated with my mother, so that she like wrote it down on a sticky note so that I could be in front of her, right? Because she went through a lot: cancer, brain cancer. And so for anyone who's thinking about doing anything outside of what's considered the norm or the standard, all I can say is, like, if you have a mission or a passion that is burning deep within your soul, you are doing humanity a disservice if you do not pursue that mission or that passion, because it's going to take people like you, like me, who burn the boats, so to speak, and just have to believe that this seed was planted within us because it was meant to bear fruit, whether it's for ourselves or for someone else. So I don't know if at any point in my life I've ever, taken a risk and ended up not in a better place than I started. I do think a lot of us have, obviously, a fear of what's known versus unknown. But man, if it's something that's keeping you up at night, or you're thinking about it incessantly like I was, like, you don't hold that back, because that is going to help somebody or a large group of people at some point, whatever that may be. And hopefully your positive intention will change the world. So
I couldn't have thought a better way to end the podcast. Dr. Greene, thank you so much for coming on, for leaving us with so much to reflect on, to think about, for leaving us inspired, empowered, and walking away from this, knowing that individuals like you are truly invested in our success as a whole. So thank you for making the time today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You got it.